It's the Sports Peninsula podcast coming up. We continue our NFL draft prospect coverage leading up to the April 25th first round start here in Detroit, Michigan. In this episode, we'll look at the tight ends. This is a solid class with a guaranteed day one presence. Can tight end needy teams wait for day three to get great value, or will teams need to spend day two assets to get their target? We'll give our thoughts and break down the top prospects next. Now here is your Sports Peninsula team. Welcome, everybody, to the Sports Peninsula podcast. My name is Dave Drzezinski. Drew, it is Sunday, March 10th. We are about 6 weeks away from the NFL draft here in Detroit, Michigan, starting April 25th on a Thursday. That's when the first round starts. I'm Drew. I'm joined by Coach Andy Shield of the Marine City Mariners. Coach, how you doing today?
Doing well, Drew. Doing well. Yeah, the draft is springing up closer. They're talking about it more and more in the local news, and starting to see things pop up in the Freep and in the Detroit news, and it's exciting times. Here we are with the tight ends.
Yeah, and I mean, we're to chronologically get everyone kind of level set here. The combine's finished, so now you have a lot of rating changes, and ours as well. I mean, because you're going to see that happen, and now free agency is going to start opening up. That's going to change the mindset of these teams going into in terms of what their needs are. Detroit Lions included, obviously. So what we talk about today may change dramatically 30 days from now. Don't know. But, as of right now, this is where we're at, and this is what we see. I don't think the prospects in terms of how they're rated change much going forward. The pro day may affect that a little bit, but what the team's priorities are, that's going to change pretty dramatically. So that'll be fun to talk about. But Coach, tight ends, position of I guess in terms of the Detroit Lions, they just recently re-signed Brock Wright. Shane Zylstra's back, at least they've been tendered. James Mitchell's still there, and of course that Sam Laporta fellow that they drafted last year, he's pretty good. Not a huge need here, but I wouldn't rule it out for day three. What are your thoughts on it, Coach?
No, absolutely. I think you summed it up perfectly, Drew. Remember, we are coached by a tight end. So, and our offensive coordinator is a former tight ends coach. So we really appreciate that position, and especially of the versatility that some of these tight ends can bring. I don't think it's ever out without, outside the realm of possibility that we would look at a tight end. Yeah, I don't think it's something that we're prioritizing or making a trade up to do. But certainly I could see the potential for a day three tight end to surface, especially if we were to acquire some picks or really hit some home runs on some things and some needs that we're able to address, in days 1 and 2.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Coach. And let's talk about the field, if you will, and some of the guys you've been looking at.
Well, yeah, on the Sports Peninsula podcast big board, the top 20 tight ends after the combine, Elijah Arroyo of the Miami Hurricanes is our 20th ranked prospect. Keon Zipperer in the state of Florida, up at Gainesville at the University of Florida, is at 19. Bryson Nesbitt from North Carolina at 18. McAllen Castles in Knoxville, Tennessee with the Volunteers sits at 17, and then at 16 is Gavin Bartholomew of Pittsburgh. Into the top 15, we have Isaac Rux of BYU. Might be talking about him here in a little bit. Jared Wiley of TCU, saw him last year. Real good prize for them. Austin Stogner of Oklahoma. We're going to be talking about him in a bit. Brevin Spanford out of Minnesota. Trey Knox out of South Carolina. Round us at number 11. Into the top 10, Tanner McLaughlin from Arizona. And the reprise of that program, he was a big part of that offense, sits at 10. Eric All, a former Michigan Wolverine turned tight end Iowa Hawkeye. We'll be talking about him here in a little bit at 9. Dalen Holker from Colorado State, another guy that we're going to be talking about. A.J. Barner from Michigan. Haven't talked about too many Michigan prospects, but he's yet maybe a guy that will familiarize yourself with that program that had a decent year this year. Caden Stover, we will be talking about him. He's into our top 6 from Ohio State. Jaheim Bell from Florida State at 5. Theo Johnson from Penn State at 4. Ben Sennett from Kansas State at 3. Jatavion Sanders from Texas at 2. And number 1, and it's the consensus number 1. There's a couple of consensus number 1 guys, I think, in this draft, Drew. Brock Bowers from Georgia is definitely one of them.
Yeah, and in the intro we mentioned there's a day one presence. He's it. He's the guy. But what a prospect he is. And let's just jump into it, Coach. Let's talk about Brock Bowers out of Georgia. What do you like about him?
6'3", 243-pound junior. As you stated, he was a true freshman and sophomore on those great University of Georgia teams, a big time producer on both of them. He comes from the West Coast out in Napa, California. He was recruited as a quarterback, tight end, and linebacker at the Division I level. So this is an amazing athlete. Very, very athletic. 4'4", 840 at 6'3", 243. He's the Mackey Award winner the last two seasons. In 2022 and 2023, that goes to the nation's top tight end. This is a premier receiving offensive producer at tight end, or the H-back position, whatever you want to call him, tight slot, whatever you want to call him. He's a 3-time All-American, 3-time All-SEC selection, 13 TDs as a freshman, 175 career receptions, 2,538 career receiving yards, 31 career total touchdowns. Some of those are rushing touchdowns as well. Brock Bowers presents a massive offensive weapon that can put up offensive production like a wide receiver can.
He is a special athlete, played at a big-time program, and put up big-time results, Coach. And I know there's more to like. What other strengths do you see in Brock Bowers?
Well, how they utilized him in Athens, Georgia, and what Coach Kirby Smart did with him and the Bulldogs, he was able to just get do so much damage after the catch. He gets a lot of extra yardage, and that's his athleticism is just extraordinary. For a player to be able to catch the ball and just turn upfield the way he does and garner yards, it's amazing. He comes up big in contested situations. 50-50 balls, wins a lot of them. He's got just a very rare athlete. Great blend of athleticism and size. Very similar to a George Kittle and a Sam Laporta in that regard. He has top end ball skills and body control, just like those guys do. They have that tight end university that they actually do have, I think, in the offseason. Former Detroit Lion and Minnesota Viking TJ Hawkinson also is a big participant in that. You're going to see Brock Bowers there because he belongs there. He's that type of a player. He can outstretch the zone coverage, which if you're sitting in zone, typically you don't have any surprise routes get over the top of you. He still has that capability to do that. He's a willing and promising blocker. That is not necessarily his greatest attribute to date, but he is very willing at it. And that's what's going to eventually make him, as he matures, a better inline tight end in the future. Very, very high competitive motor. Really, as a competitive player and an aggressive, confident player. He's alignment versatile and play versatile. You can hand him up balls off in the backfield as a rusher as well. Great functional strength. He is the tight end prospect. Even though maybe he might not be the greatest inline tight end, and we'll get to that here in a minute. Today, Drew, he possesses just a potential much greater than any player at this position in this draft.
Yeah, I in seeing his statistics and seeing him perform at the combine, I immediately kept thinking of Kyle Pitts right away, just in terms of how athletic and how versatile he is at that position. I don't know, Coach. This guy is really, really special, and he got overshadowed a bit at Georgia because of just the greatness around him. But everyone knows who Brock Bowers is, and this guy is going to be a tremendous tight end in the NFL. I think his upside is through the roof. I know there's some things you see that he does need to refine or work on. Let's talk about those.
Well, it's kind of funny you bring up Kyle Pitts, and it's almost like we're getting out in front of some of the things that Kyle Pitts has shown the need to have worked on a little bit, and already kind of placing those upon Brock Bowers as well. But I think some of those things stand to be as questions to be answered. To be quite honest with you, he's going to need to refine as a route runner. He needs to be able to have those kind of nuances. We saw a trade yesterday, and it was kind of hit the the NFL news internet buzz a little bit in regards to Jerry Jeudy being moved to Cleveland. And some of those, and a lot of it was backhanded. There's, obviously some bad blood, I think, with Jerry Jeudy in Denver as he departs, and Mark Schlereth, who, is a kind of a royalty offensive lineman type there in Denver.
Yeah.
And a member of the media really, sounded off, so to speak. But one of his criticisms is a legitimate one. And I think some of these guys that are these very nuanced route runners that do a lot of, exaggerated body movements and these bluff moves to try to counter and get open, sometimes they can commit so much to that, Drew, that the quarterback is sacked by the time they eventually do get open, because it's taken them so long to actually get out and into their route, stem of their route. So, I mean, those are the things that he actually has to embrace and not maybe have that become too much of an issue, because I think Kyle Pitts at times it has been a little bit something that he's put a little too much emphasis on. I mean, there is still that you've got to get open, get there, get to a space, and then refine yourself, or set somebody up by getting the space first, then counter them with one of those moves, and now you're open. Be careful there. Brock Bowers needs to be careful there with how much he does that. Makes sense. He does need to do it. He needs to be more difficult to cover and man. And that's what we're talking about. He can be trailed pretty easily. And that was something that happened to him at the college level. Can he be a true inline tight end tomorrow? Or are we really using him as a tight slot H-back type primarily, and developing him into an inline tight end? Can he prove enough as a blocker to be an inline tight end? Is that some way you're going to ever really use him, or is that just not going to be his calling card? You can be highly successful and a great player without doing so. However, you aren't quite as versatile as some other tight ends in the league will become if you don't. Press man coverage has worked against him. It's worked. It's rerouted him. It's been something that's been allowed him to be trailed. So those are some things that, are questions that Brock Bowers needs to answer in order to be the productive type player he was at the college level.
All legit. And I think the floor for Brock Bowers is he's going to be an outstanding offensive threat at tight end in more of that H-back / tight end slot role, like you articulated, and still worthy of a top 10 selection. If he gets the blocking dialed in, and 80% of the battles being willing to do it, and that's a strength for him. So I have a high level of confidence that Brock Bowers will develop into a very serviceable blocker, not a liability out there whatsoever. Will he become an elite blocker? I don't know that. I'm not sure he has to be elite as a blocker. I think he can be a very serviceable and good blocker, a disciplined blocker. But you're right, Coach. There are no style points. Get open. And he's got the ability to do it. So just do it. Get to where you need to be. Make the one move and go. You're strong enough and fast enough to make it happen. And a guy like Brock Bowers could become he literally could be a top 5 tight end in this league. I won't say top tight end because Kittle's very good. Laporte is very good. Mark Andrews is very good. Guys like that, we want to, we talk about them, and Hawkinson, very good. He can be in that conversation. There's no reason he can't be in that conversation. I feel real good about Brock Bowers. There's no question. And he's one of those guys where I think a team in the top 10, they may not have an immediate need at tight end, but he may be too good to pass up. He's legit top 10 prospect. He's a very good football player. Serious prospect as an offensive weapon. Yeah, can't beat it. 4.48 speed as a tight end with tight end body. Man, that's good stuff right there. Very rare athlete. And I say rare athlete, but we've been seeing quite a few, right? And we talked about Pitts, Laporte, Hawkinson, Kittle, those guys. And they're doing great things. That Travis Kelce fellow, I don't want to not mention him. He's 34. Yeah, he's been around the block too. Yeah, he's the best of the bunch. Yeah, and there'll be more to come. This type of player is really kind of about what today's new NFL and new football is all about. The modern form of power football. Yeah, and I mean, and I'm not a huge fan of him, but I give him his props. Shannon Sharp really became that first type guy,
Yeah.
a super athletic, big physical tight end that could play like a receiver. David Boston tried it from the wide receiver position, and it worked for a little bit, but his shelf life wasn't long. But if for a 2 or 3 year span, he was dominant. Kind of guys like that. So yeah, Brock Bowers exciting. He's the tight end prospect that people are going to be looking at in day one, no question. Let's go to our number 2 prospect, Coach. What do you like?
Well, Jatavion Sanders from Texas is a 6'4", 245-pound junior. And as you stated, Drew, he's our number 2 tight end prospect. Comes out of the state of Texas, Denton, Texas native, 5-star recruit, 2-time all Big 12 player. He was an all academic all Big 12 member as well. So young guy gets it done in the classroom, has got some work ethic to him. 99 career receptions, 1,295 career yards, 7 career touchdowns. He may not have the prolific statistics that Brock Bowers had, but something to note with him, Drew, is that Texas Longhorn quarterbacks had a 111.8 quarterback rating when they targeted Jatavion Sanders. So this is a highly successful and productive member of the offense, a successful offense at that.
Yeah, and that tells me 2 things. 1, he catches what's thrown to him. And 2, he's open and available and makes himself available for his quarterbacks to be targeted. So those are very good positives, no question. Let's talk about what else you like about him, Coach.
Well, we look at this guy. You were kind of mentioning some of those kind of like Shannon Sharp style tight ends. This is very much what we're looking at. This is a big receiver first style tight end. He's got great hands and has a great ability to high point the ball, a la Shannon Sharp. Very, very similar in that regard. Real good in those contested situations. Kind of a jump ball tight end. He's an elite athlete. Does not drop the ball very often. He fights off the press with ease, which he does that maybe even a little bit more, I guess, skilled and easily than maybe Brock Bowers does. And he's, again, another one of these guys. And Steve Sarkisian used him this way at Texas. It's kind of a yards and space guy in this modern kind of form of power football, which is get the ball out to a rolling tight end or a crossing tight end and let him turn up field. Almost like the modern form of the sweep is through it, like throwing it to the tight end on a crossing route. Or releasing him upfield. He can make plays down the field. He's alignment versatile. He's got skill in route running. This is an elite tight end from a pass catching standpoint, and somebody that's going to be involved in someone's passing game next year, Drew. He's going on day 2 early.
Yeah, I wanted to say, I think talent wise, he could be knocking on the door of day 1 in terms of talent. Mm-hmm. Team need is going to push a lot of the tight ends back just because that right, even today that position group still is viewed that way, and that's okay. But he was never like the number 1 option at Texas either. Even the last 2 years, when you got a Bijan Robinson and then a Brooks in the backfield. Well, right there, that tells you what you're looking to do, and that's great. And they have great receivers on that team too. And that Texas team was something else. Getting into the playoff this year, he just wasn't one of the top options. So that I think that maybe resonates to how he wasn't targeted as often, but he was very good when he was. But there's some things you want him that you probably needs to work on, Coach. And let's talk about what you see.
Well, he's got to offer more in the blocking end. He's got to elevate his technique and really elevate his game as an inline blocker. It is not. At least Brock Bowers is going to be willing to do this and is going to commit to doing it. And he may not look the greatest at doing it at times. It's going to be a little bit of a. He'll have some difficulty with some of those more skilled defensive ends and edge players. Jatavion Sanders, despite that great physical size and ability, is going to struggle with those elite edge defenders from a standpoint as a blocker. And can he even really be an effective run blocker in the NFL? Or is he truly going to be a downfield tight end receiver type. Well, if that's the case, he'll be coming off the field at times, and we're going to know what's happening when he's not on there. Or they'll use him as just kind of a runoff player. Again, if the season started tomorrow, he's probably gonna, and he had an elite assignment in regards to a Bosa brother or a Burns or even an Aiden Hutchinson type. Gonna struggle. He's gonna struggle mightily. There's some skill and some things that he needs to commit to and become there. And really, it really comes down to that. I mean, if you look at his weaknesses across the board, it's blocking. He's got to refine himself as a blocker if he wants to be an every down tight end.
Yep, and that will see, unless he can show a scout or two that these are unfounded and he's got it together. This guarantees he's a day 2 prospect at best, which is not a bad thing. But no team's going to take a chance on day 1 on a guy that has questions about that part of his game. But he's, like you said, Coach, physically he can do it.
Oh, and there's evidence on film of it. There's evidence of film on. I mean, it's not like he's void of it as a blocker, but it does kind of look at times that he's just not committed to it. And it's almost some of his better blocks, and there are some on film really done by accident. I mean, he didn't even really mean to. So I mean, those are some things that probably it's definitely going to be a deal breaker for some squads too.
Yeah, it makes sense. He's kind of an enigma in that regard. The talent's there and the physicality's there. It's like the willingness to be that guy. And like you said, Bowers isn't necessarily the best blocker, but the willingness is there, and that's a key. So it's going to be real interesting to see Sanders. I see him as turning out to be. I think he can be a very good tight. It'll be a very good tight end too, off the hop. I think he can be a tight end 1 if he addresses these concerns that you've listed here, Coach. So good job on this. Good job on Sanders. Let's talk about the number 3 prospect, Coach.
And our number 3 prospect on our tight end big board is Ben Sinnott out of Kansas State University. Another guy about 6'4", 250, very similar in size to Jatavion Sanders. He's also a junior. Stays from right out of the Midwest, Waterloo, Iowa. He's a 2-time All Big 12 player, a 3-time academic All Big 12 selection. So another guy really got it done in the classroom, super focused that way. 82 career receptions, 1,138 career receiving yards, 11 career total touchdowns. This past season, he had 49 receptions, 676 yards, and 6 TDs. So he was a real big part of that Wildcat offense. Ben Sinnott had very impressive film. Really like what I saw from Ben Sinnott from that regard. He really popped on film.
He's something else. He definitely been climbing the board steadily. And it's just he's showing it, like you said, on film. He showed it on his workouts too. He's a solid player. Talk about what else you like, Coach.
12 highlights on his highlight film. And, plays downfield as a vertical threat, plays underneath, really, really secure catcher. And he's a very active and physical blocker. Most physical blocker, the most impressive blocking portfolio of anybody in their highlight film. He's alignment versatile. They moved him all over the formations at Kansas State. He's got tremendous effort as a run blocker. So this is a guy that, we've spoken of, a couple of candidates that, aren't necessarily unwilling, but maybe need to refine as a blocker. Ben Sinnott brings that to his game. That's one of his big pieces of his arsenal. He's a very fluid receiver. He's got really impressive catch radius. He can kind of go up and get balls. Again, he's good in contested situations. Very similar to Jatavion Sanders and Brock Bowers. Great clutch hands. And he's been able to separate when he runs his routes a little bit. A long strider. He's got some nuances. Very impressive in that regard too. Really well balanced tight end prospect here, Drew. I've liked him more and more, and he's quietly climbed the boards. And it's not just our board; he's climbed a lot of boards, and he's very quietly done that. And he doesn't. I think the thing about him is he doesn't do anything that makes your eyes pop, but he does everything pretty well. He's very consistent. So, I definitely like him a lot too. But there's some things he needs to work on, right? Let's talk about that. The biggest thing he brings to the table is his effort and his skill in the blocking area, and ability to really truly be an inline guy and somebody that's very good blocker in space as well, moved around in the formation as an H-back. But some of the things that we are that remain to be seen are is his athleticism. Is it enough to be to separate man coverage? Can he truly be a guy that if somebody locks over a safety or a nickel corner or one of these coverage linebackers, or even a guy that's nuanced as a pass dropper like a Hutchinson,
No problem.
but guys that can drop and block this out, I guess. Guys that can really drop into coverage and those kind of skilled edge players that can do that. That is, are they going to pose kind of a problem for Ben Sinnott? He has struggled with press man coverage a little bit like Brock Bowers has. That's been something that's been a bit of an answer, and maybe doesn't have the top end speed that some other guys have. But nonetheless, this is a real complete tight end prospect, and somebody that's going to aid someone's tight end room big time, and eventually, and maybe very early on, become a starter.
Yeah, I think you're spot on him. And so the thing is, it's like if I'm a GM and I'm looking at Sinnott and Sanders, I have higher upside in my mind with Sanders, but I'm getting a more sure thing with Sinnott. With what you articulate here, that's what you're going to get from Ben Sinnott, and that's good. But I don't think he could be apples to apples. I think Sanders is just the better athleticism and can probably give you a little more if he addresses his issues. Sinnott is going to give you what he's going to give you, which is very good blocking and very sure-handed guy. He's just not as dynamic potentially in terms of how he gets open, but he's going to get open. And that's the thing. He could really surprise some people. So I think it wouldn't shock me if he drafted ahead of Sanders. It wouldn't. But athletically, I agree. He's not as there with him in terms of the ceiling. But he's a very good prospect. So nice work on him, Coach. Let's talk about our next prospect, our number 4 prospect on the board. And this is a guy who's really shot up the board.
Yes, he did, Drew. Yes, he did. Theo Johnson has jumped up the board big time. He was not in our top 6 initially. He was on our big board, but he was not at number 4. And the 6'6", 260-pound junior from Penn State is really climbed the board, and it really did so at the combine, and he really did so after some really good film study. Hey, he's a local boy. This is a Windsor, Ontario native. So he's a 4-star Canadian prospect right across the Detroit River in Windsor, Ontario, which is kind of cool. 77 career receptions, 938 career receiving yards, 12 career TDs, 7 this past year. So his biggest year was this past year. He's kind of a Johnny-come-lately in some regards. But when you look at his body of work, when you target Theo Johnson, he is delivered. 124.9 QBR rating when targeted. So when this guy gets the ball, he does major things with it. This is a big time. This was a guy that really did some things at Penn State. And it's somebody that you wait and see. Theo Johnson's going to be a name in pro football.
I love him. Yeah, he was, like you said, he was one of our dark horse candidates that we were thinking was going to surprise people. I don't think he's going to surprise too many people now, but I mean, we'll talk about his strengths and weaknesses here coming up. But I think Theo Johnson is an exceptional tight end, and I really like him a lot. But let's talk about what you like, Coach.
Well, his strengths, he has great hands in contested situations. And I know that's been somewhat of a consistent asset for a lot of these guys, but it certainly is with Theo Johnson. And at 6'6", 260, he has the frame for that to truly be also the situation at the NFL level as well. Because he's just got that size. He's fearless through the middle. He will come across I don't know if he's a pond hockey guy from Windsor and is used to flying across the ice and collecting bodies as he skates across the ice or what. But he's fearless like that through the middle. Fiercely competitive football player. He's got great functional strength. Like we said, he's got the high end frame and size for the NFL. 6'6", 260. Really is going to aid him as a blocker, really going to aid him in those contested situations. He moves like a receiver. He can really move like a receiver, like some of those guys, like Brock Bowers, like Jatavion Sanders. He's got some of those movement skills. Real impressive athlete.
He's got a lot to offer on the offensive end in terms of pass catching, and he's doing some special things at Penn State there for that program. But let's talk about what he needs to work on, Coach.
Yeah, like I said, he's physically fearless. The physicality's there. That's not the concern. But he's got to get stronger to be the blocker he's going to need to be in the NFL. That has to get there, and that's going to be, again, most of the rookies are in that situation, but he's certainly not void of it. He's going to need to expand his route tree a little bit. He was asked to do certain things at Penn State. He did them very, very well. He certainly responded. Those were true assets. Going to have to be able to refine and be even more expansive in his route tree at the NFL level. He was very well coached in college, but still raw, needs refinement in a lot of areas. He played Canadian football up to about 4 years ago.
Good point.
And, those are some things, the American game is not necessarily as east and west as the Canadian game can be. It's more vertical. And then the Canadian game has got so many similarities to it. It's not like we're talking about truly apples and oranges, but it's a little bit more football in the phone booth than the American side of things. He's got to be able to play that way at the NFL level, Drew.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, Coach. If I'm a GM, and I'm not, and I'm sure a lot of people are grateful that's the case, but I would after Bowers, this is the guy I'd be looking at. If I need, and the reason I say that because it's a little more one-dimensional thinking. If I need a pass catching threat as a tight end, this is my number 2 guy. Now, I'm not saying he's not a good blocker, but I agree with you. He needs to get stronger in that. But what I saw at the combine tells me he absolutely can do it. He is a physical specimen. He opened some eyes big time, especially on his the 3-cone drill. That was impressive stuff. He's very athletic and very big. 6'6", 260, be athletic. Wow. He's got a high ceiling. It's a lot of ifs, but he's got a high ceiling. I really like Theo Johnson a lot. Is he going to be a Lion? No. A lot of the guys we're talking about today won't be, but at the same time, ooh, man, that's a nice skill set that he brings to the table. So look out for Theo Johnson in the NFL, kids. He's going to be a good one. Let's talk about the number 5 prospect, Coach, out of Florida State.
Yes, and this is a transfer prospect. We've been talking about a lot of transfers, but Jaheim Bell left the University of South Carolina for Florida State this past year. It worked out quite well for him. 6'2", 241-pound junior. So he's got a little bit more of this H-back size, kind of new age tight end. That's not necessarily one of these big 6'6", 260-pounders. A guy that's very, very mobile and a little bit more of like what we would refer to as a slot-tight player. He is our number 5 prospect out of Lake City, Florida. He transferred from the University of South Carolina, where he was a 2-time All-SEC player for the Gamecocks. He comes over to Florida State. He's all ACC with the Seminoles. He had 73 carries for 261 yards and 3 touchdowns in 2022 for South Carolina. That's his rushing statistics for one season. As a career, 95 career receptions, 1,260 yards, 9 career receiving touchdowns, 4 career rushing touchdowns for 13 total. This guy is an athlete, a rare athlete, and somebody that's quite different, somebody that's a chess piece, somebody that could be a chess piece, and really for some people is going to be very highly coveted as such.
Yeah, and that's why we like him at 5, Coach. He has a unique versatility in him. We talked about some guys are blocking, excel at blocking. Some guys are a great pass catcher. Some are, like a Bowers can do a lot of both. Although like you said, he needs to get more refined in his blocking. But Bell does a lot of things really well. And like you said, with being able to run the football that effectively from that position, that's unique, certainly for the NFL. But let's talk about what else you like about Jaheim Bell, Coach.
He is phenomenal in the open field, Drew. He can outrun really any linebacker or safety that really tries to match with him in man coverage. He's a man nightmare. And because they typically motion him and use him across formations, he is so difficult to cover in that regard. Exceptional athleticism and agility. This is a guy that really can move in the open space. Another one of these players that moves like a wide receiver. He's got great twitch and explosiveness, which gets him those releases off the line. That's why he can bunker in as an inline tight end and get open that way. He's very dangerous, as we said, in the open field. And we talked about his fluid and flexible moving capability. He's an excellent route runner and really can sell routes, really can have that bluff move and make the move to get open. Very difficult tackle to make. And that's why he's been tasked and with the responsibility of carrying the football as a rusher as well. So, I mean, this is a really intriguing prospect because as an offensive weapon, Jaheim Bell definitely is that.
He's unique. He's definitely unique. I don't know if we've covered a tight end prospect. This is our 7th draft now we're doing here that has this versatility. I'm very intrigued by him. I see a lot of upside too, Coach, but there's some things he needs to work on, right?
Well, really, in his career, whether it was at Columbia, South Carolina with the University of South Carolina Gamecocks or in Tallahassee with the Florida State Seminoles, he was never really featured very well as a blocker. That's not what he does well. And he's really kind of considered that new style H-back slot tight end. And, he will line up in line and has the ability to kind of get open as a receiver, but really as an inline blocker, he has struggled anytime he was really lined up that way. There's not a lot of clips of him being a really active blocker. I mean, there are some things they've shown. He gets in the way. He will commit to it. It's not that he won't, but I mean, he needs to be prepared for the NFL physicality, or else he's going to get knocked around a little bit. Player, he can get really out physical at the line of scrimmage. And, his limitations as a run blocker do probably show up and is a reason why he maybe slips down the board a little bit in regards to being the top tight end selected. However, that being said, somebody that really does not want that from a tight end prospect, that wants a chess piece, a guy that they can move around and do all sorts of different things and get the ball to in creative ways, maybe Jaheim Bell climbs above those boards a little bit. But Jaheim Bell is just not the blocker that maybe some of these other candidates and prospects at tight end are.
Got a little Taysom Hill in a sense, in that being a home tight end. Of course, Hill can play quarterback, but at the same time, Bell can play running back too, and when needed, and it's different. I agree with the chess piece analogy, and I do think if he's drafted day 2 in the 3rd round, that would be something I'd be happy with if I were Bell. I'm seeing him more around day 3 in the 4th round, earlier day 3, because he's going to make an impact immediately. Not saying he's going to start, but he'll be in packages, he'll be on special teams, he will contribute immediately and could eventually be a fixture in an offense as a starter. So I like him a lot too, Coach. I'm interested to see who gets him and what they do with him more than anything. Let's talk about the number 6 prospect out of The Ohio State University, Coach.
Yep, back to the Big Ten. Our number 6 guy on our tight end big board is Cade Stover, as you had said, from The Ohio State University, 6'4", 247-pound senior. He's an Ohio prospect from Mansfield, Ohio. He was the 2018 Ohio High School Division III Defensive Player of the Year. And he came to Columbus initially as a defensive player. Played the first couple of years of his career as a linebacker, transition edge type. So this is a pretty diverse football player that can play and is shown to be able to play a lot of different types of football, which really is going to aid him as he moves forward. The last couple of seasons, he was a tight end, moved over to the offensive side where he was a 2-time All-Big Ten player at tight end. So it was a good move for him. It was a good move for Cade. He does have 16 career tackles and a forced fumble as a defensive player, 82 career receptions, over 1,000 yards career receiving, and 10 career touchdowns in those 2 seasons. So a very productive player, had one heck of a career for a storied and prominent powerhouse program in the country. Cade Stover is a guy that's definitely going to get his look in the NFL.
Yeah, and this is a program, I talked about Sanders not being targeted, first target in Texas. Talk about Ohio State. I mean, the receiving cores that they've had over the last couple of years. I mean, we talked about Marvin Harrison Jr. already being a top 3 pick, possibly even a number 1 pick, depending on how the situation turns out. For him to put up this kind of productivity in only 2 years at that position that he switched to, that's impressive. So he's definitely an intriguing prospect, no question. Let's talk about what else you like, Coach. What are his strengths?
Well, we look at Cade Stover. You look at his frame, and again, about 6'4", 247. He's got a real good frame. It's very similar to Brock Bowers. It's sturdy, it's thick, but it's compact and athletic as well. It's sturdy, thick, yet explosive. And he kind of has that all-around movement capability as a player. He's a physical threat after the catch. He's a tough tackle. He is not going to go down willingly. He can run past linebackers and stretch zones a little bit. This is an athlete. Why they moved him, it's why they moved him to the offensive side from the defensive side, is they really saw his burst and ability to be a stretch player that way. His great hands and is an excellent athlete. So, this is a guy that really fits a lot of what is considered in the modern NFL, what a tight end brings to the table. Fluid and agile, strong and physical hands as a blocker, very, very, very willing blocker, not dissimilar probably to Brock Bowers in that area. He's going to have to refine and get better, but definitely contributes in the blocker as a blocker. And I tell you what, this is a guy that, again, I'm not sure where he's going, if he's going on day 3 or if he's at the back end of day 2, he's going to make an NFL roster, Drew. Cade Stover is a ball player.
Yeah, he is. He can do everything well, and he's he's definitely above average pass catcher, and could become a very, very skilled pass catcher in the NFL. I agree. But what does he need to work on, Coach?
Just like Brock Bowers, again, we had kind of said, I kind of almost segued a little too early there, was that he's got to work on his blocking skills to be most effective in the NFL. And he's got to struggle to separate a little bit in man coverage. I think press man's going to do some work on him a little bit. The NFL level press man coverage, and just being able to be kind of jumped in man coverage is something that he's going to be concerned about. His catching radius is a little bit underwhelming. He's kind of turn around and throw it to me type guy. He's not going to track things, like maybe some of the other prospects can. He can be a little stiff in his route running, which could limit him a little bit. In order to be the most explosive he can be. He's got to become more of a nuanced route runner, and he's got to be, really show that he's a willing and technical blocker, and he's going to have to learn and become alignment versatile to be a successful tight end in the NFL. Those are the things that Cade Stover is going to have to develop, and that's an important word I think we mentioned here, Drew, is develop. His best days are probably ahead of him and down the road. That being said, this is a good prospect and one that, is going to definitely make somebody's organization better at tight end 2 or tight end 3, at least for the initial phase of his career.
Yeah, I like him a lot. And I think he has a very high ceiling, high upside. And I think at worst, he's a tight end 2 who's a contributor to any offense. He's a total package in terms of his skill set. Again, he doesn't necessarily excel at anything per se, but he's an above average pass catcher, and I think he can get better, like you said. I think the key will be if he can get better tracking routes, like you said, instead of just being that turnaround, throw it to me guy. That would put another, kind of give him something more in his repertoire and make him that much more versatile and dangerous out there. I like him a lot, and we certainly saw him a lot. Being here in the Sports Peninsula, you get to see Ohio State every year a couple of times, depending on who they're playing, right? So
every week if you want to.
Yeah, every week if you want to. Let's talk about our dark horses, Coach. Now I'll kick this one off. AJ Barner out of the University of Michigan, And as you'd previously mentioned, they had a pretty good season last year from what I heard. He's out of Aurora, Ohio. No surprise. A lot of Michigan Wolverines get recruited out of the state of Ohio, and much to their chagrin, but that's the way it is. And here we are. But he transferred from Indiana. He's been an all Big Ten player, 42 receptions, 361 yards, and 4 touchdowns at IU. Part of that, of course, as we mentioned, part of that national championship team last year. So for the Wolverines, which was amazing. 64 career receptions, 610 career receiving yards, 5 career touchdowns, a QBR rating of 112.6 when he's targeted, and that was from 2023. So AJ Barner, he's a sure-handed guy, and he gets open. Was he always a number one target? No, he certainly wasn't at the University of Michigan, but that's kind of why I like him, Coach, because I think he's got that ability in him. It's just the the room is pretty crowded there on the offensive side of the football in Ann Arbor. There were a lot, not enough footballs to go around, if you will. So I'm not holding that against AJ Barner as a prospect, because talking about his strengths, he gets separation and press man coverage pretty easily, which that's important. That's very important. Exhibits great flexibility, functional athleticism. So we know he's got the goods. He can widen out and show a burst as an X receiver. So there again, it's that versatility. He can line up as a receiver, as an X receiver in this scenario. He's very good. Good accelerator and has good long speed. Very important. Great blocker and committed to the skill of blocking. So again, 80% of the battle is wanting to do it. This guy wants to do it. He's good at it. Uses hands and leverage as well as a run blocker. So he's got technique too. So he may be one of the better blocking tight ends in this draft, based on what we've seen on film. Certainly seeing him as a player at the University of Michigan. What does he need to work on? Longer frame. It does present some concerns against elite edge players. They may be able to blow through him or around him. So again, and like Coach had said, like you've said many times, these guys all got to get a little stronger, because you're just facing elite talent every week in the NFL, every day at practice. So he needs to refine as a space finder and zone coverage. So again, he's very good in press man. He's got to be able to refine his skills to be able to find that pocket in the zone and be on the same page with his quarterbacks. From what we've seen, though, even at Indiana and Michigan, he's able to get open and he's able to make catches. So I'm pretty confident he can do that, but he has to show he can do that. And he's not an uber athlete, so he lacks great overall speed, but he has good overall speed, Coach. And I really like AJ Barner. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, he really contributes, and he's shown he's a highly productive receiver for an offense. And I think that's what's jumped him up on boards. He came over, as kind of a block first tight end. And in Michigan, he transferred in, from Indiana, where, here at Michigan, where we really utilize multiple tight ends in the formation at the same time, oftentimes, to be the real nuanced blocker. And this is a guy that can line up next to an offensive tackle, put his hand on the ground, and work as a blocker. And that's something that AJ Barner is going to be kind of, I think, prized for a little bit more, because in the NFL, we see a lot more of that than we do at the college level. So I think AJ Barner really poses value to a lot of teams, and really see a guy that can really jump in as a tight end 3, work himself into a tight end 2 pretty quickly, and be a real cost-effective measure in doing so, and a long-term option for somebody's tight end room.
Yeah, I really like him. I think he's kind of a total package, and I agree with you. He's going to make a team, and he could be a long-term answer at tight end 2. But definitely got the goods. He's got the goods, and we know he can make it happen. We saw him at Michigan, so good luck to him in the draft. Let's talk about your first dark horse candidate, Coach.
Yeah, Dallin Holker comes from Colorado State University, where he was a 6'3", 241-pound junior tight end for the Rams. He is a guy that just by that body type, you can say is a versatile, kind of another one of these new age tight ends, alignment versatile tight end. He's from the state of Lehigh, Utah. He transferred from BYU, so he started off with the Cougars. He did his 2-year Mormon mission in Chile at Vina del Mar, and then promptly went and had 42 receptions for 521 yards and 3 TDs for BYU, where he was all Mountain West and first team, all group of 5. That's before he came to Colorado State, and he really opened things up for himself as a senior. Or I'm sorry, not as a senior, but in his 4th year, junior year for Colorado State. 64 receptions, 767 yards, and 7 total TDs. And they showed him kind of doing some things in some drill work in the draft or at the draft combine, and where there's a drill where they're supposed to catch and drop balls. He caught each ball and carried each ball while he caught the other. Caught 7 or 8 balls in a row and never let go of one of them. So I mean, he's got the just great hand-eye coordination. 106 career receptions, 1,288 career receiving yards, and 10 career touchdowns. He's a very experienced and mature football player. Like we said, he had gone on a Mormon mission, in his, early on in his career at BYU. So he's a little bit older than some of these prospects. So he's a crafty, savvy, nuanced, and getting open and doing so quickly. He doesn't have to be so learned in some of these kind of commands in regards to his route running capability. He's got very impressive hands and an impressive catching radius. This guy plays bigger than 6'3", 241, and how he can track a football. He's a very expanded learner. He's learned a couple of different playbooks, played for 2 different programs, and was very, very well used in those 2 different schemes. So he really knows a lot of different football schemes in that regard, which will bode well for his learning curve at the NFL. Very clutch receiver, clutch hands. He's a 3rd down machine. Guy that made a lot of plays on 3rd down for Colorado State and for BYU. And he can make these shocking plays, these just crazy catches that look like overthrows or poorly thrown balls or balls that are not going to get tracked or somehow how did he hold on to that catch? That's been said about Dallin Holker before. So real fun guy to watch that way. Real intriguing prospect.
Yeah, that's there's a lot to like about his offensive side. I mean, pass catching ability, definitely. And I like what you mentioned, learning those 2 different playbooks, being at BYU and then Colorado State and excelling in both. Yeah, you can't buy that. I mean, that's hard. You can't coach it. That's aptitude and football IQ. It's a beautiful thing. What does he need to work on, Coach?
We're not talking about the most explosive athlete. There's more explosive athletes in this draft at tight end. So there's a little bit of a downshift right there. Are his movement skills dynamic enough? And does he possess the physicality to be an NFL player on an every down basis or even in sub packages for very long? He lacks the top end speeds. These are some things that are probably pushing Dallin Holker down to the 3rd day. He does exhibit a little bit of some stiffness and might not be as fluid of a bender at the waist and lower. He had a pretty significant ankle injury and has had some injuries in his legs. So there's a few miles on Mr. Holker, and he's already a few years down the road as a football player. 2 years were taken off, so it's not like just because he is 24 years old, or 25 years old, does that mean that he's got those kind of football miles on his body? No, not necessarily, but he's got some miles. He's been dinged up a little bit in his career.
Yeah, and that's going to be something to watch, obviously. I think he presents great day 3 value because at the very least, you're going to get a good special teams player, a tight end 3, potential tight end 2. At best, you could get a real rock solid tight end 2 who's also a special teams contributor all the time. And, depending on what kind of offense you run, could evolve into an every down kind of guy if you're running a 2 tight end set quite often, but we'll see what happens. But he's a nice player. It's a good selection. I want to talk about we're talking about BYU. Let's talk about BYU. Isaac Rex, Coach. I like him. He's a junior. He's 6'6", 255 out of San Clemente, California. he had a Mormon mission in Samoa, and so he's fluent in Samoan. So yeah, that's not easy to do, to pick up a second language, especially not as a child, as an adult. That's impressive. I work around a lot of folks, a diverse environment where I work in manufacturing. You see a lot of different people from all over the world, and to be able to pick up on a language quickly, that's impressive. All FBS independent, all Big 12 a player as well. 112 career receptions, 1,385 career receiving yards, 24 career touchdowns. And again, another guy that makes his quarterbacks look good. 115.1 career QBR when he's targeted. That's impressive. So what do we like about him? Well, he really gets outstanding release off the press. And again, that's huge. Because the first thing that's going to happen in the NFL is people are going to challenge you physically. And if you're able to handle that right off the hop, you've got a good chance. So I like that he's good at that. He's a quick, responsive athlete. So that's important. So he reacts quickly, and he has a plan B in his mind when he's playing the game, and that's huge. He has a long and broad frame, 6'6", 255. That's excellent size. A fluid mover, very much like a wide receiver. So he's a guy that can be in a 2-point stance. So you like that. And then excellent speed for it as a tight end at his size. Really good speed. So what are the question marks? Well, he doesn't stretch the zone like he should. Now, again, was it because he wasn't asked to? Hard to say, but he's definitely has an aptitude and a football IQ that I think, and coach, correct me if I'm wrong, this is stuff you can coach and get him up to speed and be able to handle that, because he's going to see a lot of zone in the NFL too. He has solid speed, a little stiff, but again, solid speed and excellent speed for his size. So, I'm saying this with an asterisk, he still has good speed, but he's a little stiff. He's not a separation creator. No question about that. So he's not a burner at all, but again, very good speed, and any slip up by a linebacker in coverage or a safety in coverage, and he's going to get open, and he proved he could in college. But I like Isaac Rex a lot, Coach.
Yeah, and I think, if you look at him, he's 6'6", 255, and he's chiseled. He is just a physical specimen. That being said, I don't know how dynamic of an athlete he is. And at 6'6", 255, your movement skills are going to be a little bit restricted. I mean, that's a big, long body. So, I mean, to be this real nuanced kind of creative movement guy that's, got a ton of bluff moves in his arsenal and unbelievable change of pace, stop and go stuff. That was probably not going to be part of his game. But is he going to be able to be dynamic enough as a route runner in the NFL to be a tight end one, and you can do some of those types of things? And will he be a good enough blocker to really be an inline tight end, which at 6'6", 255, probably an expectation that you're going to need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is the big question mark. You're right about that. I see him as a solid day 3 guy, 4th or 5th round, probably 5th round. But again, everything's fluid. But I can't see him slipping beyond the 5th round just because of his skill set and his profile. Just he brings so much potential.
He's the reason why Dalen Holker wound up at Colorado State.
Oh, there you go. So. That's interesting. So yeah, this will be fun to watch to see how he develops too, because I think he's got a lot of potential. Here's your next candidate, Coach, and we really like this guy.
Row the boat gopher. We like to talk about those guys. Brevin Spann-Ford, big 6'6", 260-pound senior out of the University of Minnesota, Big Ten product. Comes from the state of Minnesota, St. Cloud, Minnesota native. Spent all 6 years of his career, because he took his COVID year and played it. At Minnesota. He's a 2-time All Big Ten selection, 5-time All Academic All Big Ten player. So this is a gifted guy in a classroom, a very bright young man. 95 career receptions, 1,061 career receiving yards, 7 career touchdowns. He has great hands and makes very clean receptions. Big, strong, soft hands. So he catches the balls that are he's supposed to catch. And at that frame, he's got the kind of radius that is going to be helpful for him at the NFL level. Very flexible and athletic for his size. Big body guy. As you see him right here, he's lined up out. He's in at least what appears to be just inside the hash there, or just outside the hash there, kind of in a slot tight end alignment here. So he's got great athleticism for someone his size. Strong and physical against press man coverage. He's got that big body. He can get those hands and press himself off of the presser and release and get open. He's very difficult to tackle after the catch. Big body. He's excellent in contested situations. Being 6'6", 260, you got to block. And he's a willing blocker. It's not that he's soft and afraid of playing the game of football, but he's not the most explosive blocker for his size. He becomes a little bit more limited as he gets downfield. He's not a great zone stretcher. Probably lacks a little bit of that top end long speed. He's not a guy that's going to be much for separation. So at the NFL level, is he going to be a super impactful 75-80 reception tight end? Probably not. He's more of a tight end 2 type, but a guy that has got a lot of length, and he is certainly going to get his look in the NFL.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by him. I really do. I see him being a very successful tight end too in the right situation. I really like his skill set. I think he's a very good pass catcher. He's same frame as Theo Johnson, right? I mean, 6'6", 260, same measurables. So not comparing the two in that other than that, because Johnson
a little more dynamic.
Yeah, but I really like Spanford a lot. I think it's a nice selection here, Coach. Now I got to talk about a former Wolverine, and from tight end University of Iowa, Eric All, the transfer. So he's a 6'4", 252-pound senior. And Coach, we're very familiar with him here in the Sports Peninsula, watching him in Ann Arbor. He's from Fairfield, Ohio, a 4-star prospect, and again, transferred from Michigan. He was an all Big Ten selection at Michigan and Iowa. So that tells you something right there, folks. 54 receptions, 564 yards, and 2 touchdowns at U of M. 75 career receptions, 864 career receiving yards, and 5 career touchdowns for Eric All. So very solid player, very successful at Michigan. He had a really nice season, although he was injured last year. And so that may be a question mark there. But Eric All is a very solid player. What do we like about him? Well, he's strong and athletic and very competitive. And it kind of need these things as a football player, but he brings them with gusto. He's a very good football player, and he's very competitive. Clutch, soft hands, makes plays. When he's targeted, he's able to make catches, and he's someone you can trust as a quarterback. Broad, long frame, again, that very, very important. He's rocked up, and he's balanced, so that's a good thing. He's shown capability to be a zone stretcher. Something we've talked about the previous prospects maybe struggling with. That's something Eric All is very good at. He's very committed and a competent blocker. That's important, very important. Amazing experience as a college tight end to be a senior and to have the experience of playing at Iowa as well, along with Michigan. That's a nice resume to have going into the NFL. So what does he need to work on? Again, we talked about, he's hurt last year. He's been snake bit by injuries. So that's a big buyer beware flag there. And that's why we're talking about Eric All as a dark horse candidate, and maybe not in perhaps a day 2 conversation. Multiple surgeries to address the injuries. So again, the medical's got to be there. And that's where I don't think Eric All, Coach, will go above the 5th round. He's likely a 6th or 7th round pick, but somebody that's going to, I think, make a roster and impress some people. But he can struggle tracking the ball downfield at times, and he's got to refine his route running and zone coverage. Again, he's capable of stretching the zone. He's got to show that he can have the route trees there, and he can find the belly in the zone, or be able to make adjustments in his route tree when he recognizes zone coverage. But Coach, overall, I mean, I like Eric All a lot. I think if not for the injuries, again, we're talking about him in a much different light. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it really comes down to that, Drew. He's just been so banged up. I mean, it really cost him his career at Michigan. I mean, at Michigan, he was going to be, they were trying to get him to retire. they were concerned about his injuries that much. He wanted a second opinion, and then eventually asked for his release when he got that second opinion. And then went to Iowa and probably gets hurt again. And that is going to be something that really, is going to chase Eric all, his entire remainder of his football career. But that being said, the ability is there, man. He made some just in one of the Big Ten championship games, he looked brilliant in that game as a tight end, and he possesses some tremendous physical skills. Wish the best for him because he's really an electric talent.
Yep, gonna be fun to see where he ends up, Coach. No question. And we got one more to talk about, Coach, out of University of Oklahoma, your last dark horse candidate.
Yep, Boomer Sooner for Austin Stogner, tight end from the University of Oklahoma, 6'6", 255 senior from Plano, Texas. So he's comes from the Lone Star State. Very unique, kind of intrepid tale here, Drew. He started out his career at Oklahoma and played there and really established himself there as a very, very competent tight end. Then transferred to the University of South Carolina, where he played 1 year for the Gamecocks, and then came back to Oklahoma for his senior year. So he started as a Sooner and finished as a Sooner, but wasn't always a Sooner. So that's kind of a unique story there. All Big 12 at Oklahoma, 84 career receptions, 1,060 career receiving yards, and 10 career TDs. He's very flexible and fluid. Big, long-bodied tight end. I think he's pretty much the exact same size as Isaac Rex out of BYU. He's alignment versatile. He provides very strong element as a blocker. Very willing blocker. Good perimeter blocker and reach blocks well. Exhibits good body control and ball skills. This is an elite level prospect when he came out of high school. He's got great tempo and change of pace in his route running. He possesses that kind of fluid flexibility to be able to be that kind of a route runner at that kind of size. Sort of pretty impressive, to tell you the truth. He's excellent downfield in an open field as a blocker. He really works and gets that, and he's committed to it, which is huge in running game. That's how you finish runs and turn 5 and 6 and 7, 8 yard runs into house calls or 30-yard runs, 40-yard runs with those blocks downfield. He has outstanding receiving. He's an outstanding receiver in the mid-range. Again, he's a crosser nightmare. Very good at getting open and getting it and catching that football in that kind of a route scheme. He had a massive knee injury. That has changed his mobility. Since that has occurred, I tried to find as much film as I could to see what he looked like pre-injury as again post-injury. He's still, we wouldn't be talking about him if he couldn't move at all. Yeah. But he must commit to refine as a blocker, because that is going to be a big part of his game, in the NFL. Just at that size, and then to protect him and get him his just due, he's going to have to be a very good blocker at the NFL level, better than what he is even now. We've seen there have been drops in his production as opposed to beginning his career. He was tracking to be one of probably the top 2 guys we'd be talking about, probably right with Bowers and Sanders. That after that knee injury, he just wasn't able to play as much, and he had to do more rotating and those kinds of things. That being said, does he ever really truly find his fit in the NFL? I think there's a very good chance that he does. If not, I think he's a guy that plays in the UFL and keeps getting chances to play in the NFL. But I like Austin Stogner. I think there's a lot to like there.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's a really good prospect. It's going to come down to the medicals, much like Eric All too. If things check out, I could see both of these guys getting drafted and getting a shot. If not, UDFA might be the answer. I don't know, but I mean, just talking as a Lions fan, and I know this isn't a position of need, but if the Lions felt like they could get really good value in round 6 or 7, and one of those guys are there, yeah, I mean that's a possibility because the ceiling's high, and it's a lower risk decision. I'm not saying they're gonna do that, but if you were thinking about it, these are two guys that would be candidates potentially just because of their upside and perceived value at a 6th or 7th round. But yeah, good selection there, Coach. Any final thoughts on the tight ends before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I think, again, I'm anxious to see where how many of these guys go. Are we talking, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15 tight ends get drafted? I think every player that we have on our big board is obviously going to at least wind up in a camp. Brock Bowers, yeah, he's the guy I think that makes the biggest splash next year at tight end. I think Jatavion Sanders and some of the guys like that could as well. I'm fully in your camp with Theo Johnson. I think that's the up-and-comer here. And Ben Sinnott. Don't sleep on Ben Sinnott. And, hey, A.J. Barner, that's a football player. That's a real good football player that Michigan had come in from Indiana. A big part of why they won a national championship.
Yeah, and I'll be candid. This group is solid. Brock Bowers saves it by being that day one pretty elite candidate.
Yeah, this guy, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the rest of them are solid to potentially good, but there's a lot of ifs. There's a lot of ifs. So it's almost like the typical tight end class you would expect to see in that regard, because it's rare to, although we see it more often now. I mean, just guys are just more athletic and just physically more skilled now versus where they were 10 years ago versus where they were 30 years ago. It just is, it's the evolution of athleticism and how just as society, we're getting bigger. It's just how we are. I mean, it's an impressive group overall, but Bowers is definitely the class of it. So it's going to be a fun group to watch on day 2 and 3 specifically. So if you're a tight end fan, that's when you definitely want to keep your eyes peeled. And then obviously seeing where Bowers ends up, because who knows? I mean, he could go as high as 3. We were just talking about off air. Mac Jones just got traded to Jacksonville.
Yeah.
Guess what New England now needs? And they're at number 3 overall. So they're likely going in that direction. And I was seeing a lot of mock drafts showing either like maybe a Harrison Jr. or a Neighbors going to New England at 3. And I'm like, I don't see it. And now I know it's not happening. It's not happening. They're going QB. And I'm sure they'll be very happy to get whoever's there, whether it's a Drake May or a Jaden Daniels. I'm sure Daniels is probably who they're targeting, because they're going to assume that Williams and May are going to go 1 and 2. Fun stuff to watch. And in about 6 weeks, we'll be watching it in the Motor City, just like everybody else, but we'll be there. This is near our hometown. So we're looking forward to that. So for Coach Andy Shield, the Marine City Mariners, my name is Drew. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, and we will talk to you soon. This has been the Sports Peninsula Podcast. To subscribe to the podcast, simply click the subscribe button on our YouTube channel's homepage and give us a like. You can also follow our audio podcast on multiple platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Google Podcasts, just to name a few. Give us a follow on Twitter. Our handle is @SportsPodcast to check out our latest releases. Thank you again for watching and for your support. Remember, when you want to hear all about sports in the great state of Michigan, there is only one Sports Peninsula Podcast.